Enjoy with your headphones for a better listening experience.
Please watch till the end of the video to have the most scariest part of the story.
Serious. What's something so bizarre and unusual that's happened to you that you do not share it with many people? I used to live alone in a small 600 square foot apartment, and one night before bed I was sitting on the couch, texting and playing around on my phone. It was getting late, so I got up, went to the bathroom, brushed my teeth and washed my face, then went into the bedroom, put on pajamas and got into bed. I realized I didn't have my phone, so I checked both the living room and the bathroom, couldn't find it. I then spent over an hour searching for it, and still couldn't find it. Finally, I used my computer's Gmail account to call my number and then track down the ringing, only to find my phone wrapped up in a plastic grocery bag, under a pile of shoes in my closet. To this day I have absolutely no idea how it got there. It creeps me out and I don't even like to think about it. When I was about 12 I was making ramen and was standing in front of the stove waiting for the water to boil. I had opened the ramen pack and removed the flavor pack, and the noodles were beside me on the counter in the pack. I zoned out. Finally I zone back in and the water is boiling. I go to put in the noodles and they're gone. Just vanished. I look in the garbage, everywhere. I didn't remember even moving, I'd just been staring at the stove. Flavor pack was still there but the rest was nowhere. Weeks later I was cleaning the oven and removed the burners and lifted the hood of the stove, and there were my noodles. Open packet with noodles but no flavor pack. Directly under the burner I'd been using. I don't know how I'd have managed it with the burner plugged in and on high and a pot of water on top. I don't remember doing it. Still a great mystery of my life. I was working in Bolivia out of the U.S. Embassy for a few months 13 years ago. A group of us went out to dinner and drinks on a Friday night. While walking home with my housemates we came to a park area that had a footbridge across the 4-lane road and a small park on the other side. We heard a yell for help as we were crossing the bridge and saw a guy dragging a young girl by the hair. We were 30 to 40 feet away when he saw us and put a knife to her throat. He dragged her up onto the bridge and we were trying to calm him and let her go. It seemed like forever but was probably only a minute. He slit her throat and pushed her off the bridge down 20-ish feet into traffic, then took off. We were all just stunned and motionless. She was hit by 10+ cars before traffic stopped, but by the amount of blood from her neck in the 2 seconds before she fell, she wasn't going to live anyways. I never even saw a local news article on it. No clue if guy was caught. Nothing. Watched her plead for her life 1 second. Brutally murdered the next. Still have dreams about it occasionally and they fuck me up for days. Growing up with both working parents, my big sis and I stayed alone in the house most afternoons after school. One night we were watching TV and the main door was this old solid wood piece that made a hell a lot of noise when you unlocked it and opened it. So it was one of those moments when the TV went silent for some reason and my sis and I both heard clearly how the lock went off and the door slowly opened. We go, Mom or Dad is here, and hear the door closing, and since my parents got mad if they got home and caught us in their room watching TV we turn it off but hear nothing else. Big sis goes, Mom, Dad? And no response. We looked at the window and didn't see my parents' cars and start freaking out because obviously someone is in the house. Then the light of the stairs is turned on and my sis runs to close the door of my parents' room, picks up the phone and calls an uncle who lives down the street. We hear nothing again. My uncle and cousin get to the house in less than 5 minutes. We see them through the window. They get in and as my uncle searches the house my cousin goes to find my sis and I. There's nobody else in the house. He had already called my parents and they get home 10 minutes after. My sis and I heard it clearly and then the light. We know what we saw and what we heard, both of us. My parents brushed it off as us being silly, maybe we were watching some scary movie and got our imaginations working. My sis was around 15-ish and I was 11 to 12. To this day we both are freaked out by this. My friend and I were home alone in my house and we were in the basement. We were on our way upstairs to get some snacks before we went outside, and then my parents' bedroom doors, double doors adjacent to the foyer, started shaking violently. Naturally, I assumed that meant my dog was scratching at the door to get out because he sometimes trapped himself in rooms and mauled the doors in his attempts to escape. I opened the doors and there was nothing in the room. I called out my dog's name and he actually wasn't in the house, but in the backyard. So at that point my friend and I grabbed cans of bug spray and hid in my bedroom, thinking we could blind the intruder even though they were invisible, so we were trying to blind a ghost with bug spray. We sat facing my bedroom door and both watched as the doorknob turned and the door pushed slightly opens, to reveal nothing in the hall. My mom showed up 30 minutes later and laughed at us for holding the bug spray. I was a young nurse in a hospital and worked with primarily cancer patients. I had some small issues with my health, but doctors couldn't give me a definitive diagnosis within 7 years. I tried to not worry about it until my doctor would tell me it's bad, and I succeeded in that. My last workday I found a sticker lying behind the counter, "Not abnormal, the printer is there," which drew my attention. It had my own name on it, so I checked what it was for. I was scheduled for a bone marrow punction which I was not aware of. That was the day I found out I had cancer. My doctor confirmed it a few days later. A month later I was being treated by my own ex-co-workers. I wanted to return to work afterwards, but I just couldn't. I once was chased down my street after school. A man in an old Cadillac came squeezing around the corner. I saw him following me from school. I was about 7 years old at the time. I remember pedal as fast as I could and I could hear him telling me to stop and to get in his car. I was terrified, never seen him before except around town near the parks and schools. Maybe a kid's grandparent. I flew around the corner pedaling down my street and up the driveway. The door was locked and I panicked. I went back to the driveway and slid under my parents' smaller car. The man pulled up right as I got under. He got out and quickly walked over near where I was and reached down trying to grab me. I rolled over and slid further down from the angle I was in to create distance. He gave up, screamed that he would get me, got in his car and drove away. I have only ever told my wife. I was around 11 or 12 and spent the night at a friend's house nearly every weekend. He always slept really late and I was always awake earlier than him and just lay awake until he woke up. We usually slept on the floor in his living room. One morning I hear someone come into the living room. I look up and it's his mom standing there completely naked. We awkwardly locked eyes for a second or two and I just awkwardly rolled over. Weird thing is she walked through the living room and then walked back through a minute or two later. It wasn't until decades later when I talked this through with my therapist that I realized she might have been trying to seduce me. I'm gay and even as a little grayling I knew this was just gross. 16 years old, hanging out with my younger brother and cousin in a motel room on our way to a family reunion. The place we're staying at is seedy and dilapidated, and we're in the middle of what is practically a ghost town. As far as I knew, my family consisted of the only guests at the place for the night. Fast forward to about 1 to 2 a.m., brother, cousin, and I decide to all go get soda and cookies from a vending machine down the hallway. We were being loud and obnoxious teenagers, of course, but we all fall silent as an older woman comes out into the hallway. She's hunched over, greasy hair, slippers, and, haggard, doesn't come close to describing her face. She took a few steps out and she turned and glared me down. It felt like her eyes cut straight through me. She turns her face away from us, and walks to another part of the hall and seemingly vanishes. My nose immediately began to gush blood, and I ended up having my teeth, hands, and shirt covered in it. We had to rush back to our room and get toilet paper for the mess. I only ended up telling 1 or 2 people, and even then I left out the bit with the woman, too eerie to even think about what she was doing there or where she went. I work in an office that has the ubiquitous 3-drawer filing cabinets with SNG rotating combination locks. The dial is numbered 0 to 99. A coworker who was new to the building was waiting on someone to open his locked cabinet and was complaining he can't get any work done without being able to access the files, and as his predecessor had passed away without sharing his combo with the security officer, he was hooped. Whilst fucking around, sitting down in his chair with my back turned to the lock, I pretended that I had mastered the art of safecracking by touch. I spun the dials more or less randomly left right left, and then only asked him to tell me when I returned the dial to 0, when you push in the dial and turn to unlock. It opened. No one will ever believe me, but he saw it. I don't know the odds, but wouldn't it be 1 in 100 by 100 by 100? 1 in a million shot right there. Maybe, stats class was so long ago. In the town next to where I live, about 15 years ago or so, a man in town went to the police because he found a videotape, and after watching it, he discovered that it was a home video of a man raping a little girl. The police, of course, did not show the video to the public, thankfully, but they were able to post photos of the video guy's face on the news, hoping the public would find him. I was watching the news with my mom at the time, and as soon as they showed photos of the man's face, we both did that "put your hand to your mouth" in surprise motion. We looked at each other and my mom asked me where we knew him from. I couldn't put my finger on it, but the feeling of knowing him from somewhere was overwhelming for both of us. We were both sure we knew his face, but we only talked about it amongst ourselves, because we didn't want to bring it up to anybody that we would have known a child rapist. We would talk about this guy several times just with each other, trying to figure out where the hell he was from, but we never figured it out. The good news is, he was caught by police only days later. And we still have not figured out where we knew him. We weren't super social people, but I felt the sensation of knowing this scumbag deep down in my spine. 10 years ago I took over my parents' farm after they had passed away. I moved into the house I was raised in. I remember my mom, being a child of the Depression, wouldn't buy Kleenex thinking they were an extravagance. Whenever she needed to blow her nose, fix her lipstick, etc., she'd tear one sheet off the toilet paper roll, use that, then drop it into the toilet. It was something I saw often as a child. After I had been in the house for a year and had spent a lot of time painting it, modernizing it, I started finding single sheets of toilet paper in the toilet. It's not something I do and I live alone. It's just an occasional thing. I figured Mom was stopping by to check on things. The only person I've told this to is the woman I'm seeing, and my sister. They have both seen the sheets. Odd thing is, none of us think it bizarre or unusual. Just Mom checking in. Weird thing happened when I was living abroad. Went to dinner and clubbing with a girlfriend for my birthday. It was the 90s and I was in Morticia mode, slinky black silk dress. During dinner, I dripped sauce, so had to change then off to club. Around 4 a.m. we staggered home and on the way 2 guys tried to mug us. My friend, all 115 pounds, of her, lost her shit and swarmed up one guy, screaming her head off and pounding on him. She bit his nose. I started laughing like a crazy woman and swung my bag at the other guy. He took offense and tried to stab me a couple of times. Here's the first weird thing. Instead of the tissue-thin silk dress, I had changed into leather pants and a heavy leather corset with lots of metal, including the ribs. All I ended up with was some cuts to my arms instead of the holes he tried to put in my chest. Anyway, a couple of big guys heard the screams and chased off the muggers. Cops came, EMTs came, and we got back to my place around dawn, still pretty wasted, and fell into bed. Now is where it gets really weird. A couple of hours later, I sit straight up in bed convinced I heard my sister say my name. I go back to sleep. A few hours later, the phone rings and before I even touch it, I know it's someone calling to tell me that something bad has happened to my sister, which it was. She had died the previous evening while clubbing with friends. Later we figured out that if you allowed for time zone, she died about the same time I was getting stabbed. Only reason my parents didn't get 2 awful phone calls on the same night is because I dropped food on my clothes. Every once in a while, when I'm halfway between asleep and awake, I have this terrifying dream. Vision? I don't know, that there's a really creepy animal slinking through my house, like it's hunting for something to kill. It looks like some kind of wild dog, or rather, the half-rotted, animated corpse of one. I'll be half asleep, and then suddenly it's standing at the foot of my bed with this horrible snarling grin, watching me sleep. It's like watching death stare me in the face, and just having to lie there and breathe in the putrid horror of it until it leaves. It's really vivid, to the point that I can hardly move because it freaks me out so bad, even though I know nothing is there. It freaked me out for a long time, but I didn't say anything about it because it was just so weird. But then something even weirder started happening. I started noticing that a day or 2 after it would happen, a friend of mine would consistently message me out of the blue and need to talk. She suffers from suicide ideation now and then, and really doesn't like to talk about it, but I always encourage her to reach out when she needs someone to talk to about it. It kept happening over and over. I'd have the dream and she'd call me soon after. I tried to dismiss it at first. But then one day when we talked, she was really upset and said, "I don't know what to do." When the thoughts about death come, it's like my mind is a wild animal that wants to tear me apart. I feel like I'm being hunted down like prey. It scares me. That really freaked me out. So I decided to prove to myself once and for all whether I was imagining this or not. The next time I had the nightmare, I messaged her right away and asked, "Are you okay? Is something wrong?" She was really surprised and said she had been fighting with herself about whether to message me or not, because the thoughts had come again. So we talked it through as usual. A few weeks later, I had the dream again, so I messaged her again. Same thing. Every single time it was the same story. It started freaking her out after a while, so finally I came clean and told her the reason I always knew. I thought it would scare her more, but she took it surprisingly well. So now it's kind of a normal thing between us. She doesn't even have to call me first anymore, I just message her to say it'll be okay and then we talk things through. I was exceptionally close with my grandma growing up. She was my safe place. After she died I was racked with guilt for not being by her side in her final hours. She kept asking everyone where I was, and calling my other cousins by my name. Her passing devastated me. I had just gotten married and was going through so much in life, so grief really hit me hard. I had dreams for about a year after she died of wandering her house looking for her and I couldn't find her. Her house was dark and silent and cold, unlike my childhood memories of Thanksgivings and sunny afternoons at the table with her playing cards. I felt the absence, the loneliness, the silence. I would wake up sobbing, shaking, and calling out for her with a broken heart. After about a year of this, things weren't getting better and my husband was starting to really worry about. But then I had a different dream. This time I was in her house looking for her, and it was still empty, dark, and cold, until I got to her bedroom. The bedroom was bright and warm and full of my cousins laughing and talking. And there was Grandma. Light absolutely surrounded her and I ran to her and wrapped my arms around her. You guys, she was real. She was there. I can't describe it, but it wasn't a dream. I could feel her skin and smell her smell. This wasn't a dream. I began to sob again. She put her hands on my face, her soft hands with the long, strong fingernails. She looked in my eyes and asked me why I've been so upset. I can't find you anymore. I miss you. She smiled and wiped my tears, as she's done so many times in my life, and she laughed. Oh honey, I'm okay. You can let me go. I'll see you again. She hugged me so tight, and I felt this relief and love and light, just that pure happy feeling I only got from her, total peace. I woke up and I could still smell her. After that night, I never dreamed of her again. I was talking to my mom on the phone a couple days later and told her about the dreams, and then the final love/light dream. My mom got really quiet. I asked her what was wrong. She said, "Your aunt was just telling me the exact same story. Mom came to her in a dream a few nights ago and told her to let go, that she's fine and she'll see us again." So I live in a small town in Oregon that's super safe, so nobody locks their cars or houses. One day my wallet disappears from my nightstand and I couldn't find it anywhere. A few weeks later I go into the bathroom and see a note that says, "Sam was here," written in a cutesy font with little spirals around it. I thought nothing of it at first since one of my roommates always has a bunch of friends over. A week later I ask her about it and she says she doesn't know anybody named Sam and figured the note was mine. 2 days after that at about midnight I go outside to smoke a cig and there's this guy just staring at me from across the street. I got up and walked a few steps and shout at him, "What do you want?" Then he just leaves. The next day I go outside and for some reason feel like I should open up my grill and discover my wallet in there, completely untouched. Mind you, I have used the grill since I lost the wallet. I've since started locking my doors. When I was like 6 or 7 years old, I basically trespassed on this garden. It was near the house of my cousin, which I was visiting at the time, and as a bug enthusiast, I wanted to catch grasshoppers there, because the grass was so tall and more clumpy. I thought there would be larger and more interesting ones there, so I took the risk. Now, none of my relatives really knew who lived there. All I remember was a lady hanging clothes near the perimeter, and the side furthest away from where I would enter. Otherwise, it looked abandoned. While I was searching the grass and stuff, suddenly this group of people, like 5 to 10 of them, and ranging from children roughly my age to teenagers, rush out and surround me with makeshift weapons. Some had pieces of wood with nasty edges, pipes, and what seemed to be woodworking tools, while others had neon-colored toy tools or something. The younger ones wielded these. They basically asked me what I was doing in the garden. Me being the naive kid I was, thought I wasn't in danger, so I told them plain and simple that I was looking for grasshoppers. Weirdly enough, they started helping me out and even found 2 grasshoppers. I thought they were too small, so I shrugged them off. Suddenly, the alarm bells that should have gone off ages ago did. I realized that I was in the midst of armed strangers, and no one even knew I was there, aside from them. When they became busy with hunting grasshoppers, I just bolted, climbed over the garden fence, and ran home, which was around 2 blocks away. All I remember is suddenly reaching for the nearby fence, climbing over with my flip-flops, and running like the wind. I never saw those guys again, even when I went into the garden again. To this day, I've told no one and, kind of stupid, actually feel a bit guilty leaving them suddenly while they were helping me find some grasshoppers. In high school I was a staff member in one of the school organizations. I feel kind of awkward saying which organization for some reason, like it will give me away lols. Anyway, one of the teachers there let me use his computer at his desk whenever he wasn't using it. It wasn't a strange thing to me either since his office was right next to the staff conference room and the door was always open, people were always there coming and going. I had known him for a couple of years since I was involved there my entire time in high school, so I thought nothing of it. Anyway, during finals week of junior year I got really sick with a fever and went home after my COC exam. This teacher also knew I was sick. So during the first couple weeks of summer I was at the school with a lot of the other club members doing club things, and this teacher pulled me aside and began talking to me about his daughter, saying that she'd been having period issues, and wasn't having her monthly cycle for whatever reason. Then he asked me if I'd ever experienced the same thing and if he should be concerned. I was weirded out by this, but just said no and told him to take her to a doctor or something. A week later he spoke with me again in private and told me that the real reason he asked me about this was because he wanted to know if I was pregnant, noting that I had been sick during finals week. What is that? When I gave him an obvious no, he kept pressing, making sure I was positive about it. Then finally he told me why he was actually worried, because a week before I was sick, he did a little crotch check, his words, at his desk, thought that I picked some of it up while using his computer, took it to the bathroom, and somehow miraculously gotten myself pregnant with it. What is that? I learned 3 things that day. First, this guy was a total creep and did things at his desk when no one was watching. Second, he knew absolutely nothing about biology or how females clean up when they pee. Third, the computers in the classroom next door ran much faster. My family lived out in the middle of nowhere, deep in the mountains. Like 200 acres of empty forest land in every direction. When I was 5, I was playing out beyond shouting distance of the house when my shoe got caught in the V of a trunk. No matter how much I tugged, I couldn't get free. Naturally, being a 5-year-old girl, I started yelling and screaming. It was worse knowing my parents wouldn't find me for hours. Then, out of the bushes comes this guy. He was probably 16 or 17, and had the whole early 90s punk vibe about him. Leather jacket, pierced nose, multicolor hair. The works. And way beyond what little plaid hillbilly I had ever seen before. He asks if I'm okay and then helps me yank my foot free. Then he wanders off, never to be seen or heard from again. My parents passed it off as a wild story, but, if you're out there, bizarre punk guy, I owe you a beer. When I was a kid, probably around 4 to 5, Mom and I were on a walk in the bush near our house. She doesn't remember much of this for some reason, but we saw a brown snake in the grass in front of us. For non-Australians, brown snakes are extremely deadly and very common snakes. The next part is a bit foggy, but I vaguely remember dropping my bag right next to the snake and walking away, while Mum ran to hide behind a rock a couple of meters away. While Mum's hiding behind this rock, she picks up a stick and tries to grab my bag with it, all the while loudly whispering to me to get away from the snake. Instead of listening though, I decided I would just go right up and grab my bag. So I picked up my Teletubbies bag, and this is where it gets weird. I have a perfectly clear memory of leaning down and petting the brown snake on the head a couple of times while seeing Mum staring at me in shock and then screaming at me to get away from it. I then calmly walked back to her, handed her the bag, and we kept walking. The more I think about it, the more bizarre it is, simply because I was the biggest scaredy cat as a kid. I wouldn't even touch the harmless snakes they would bring into preschool for us to pet, and I knew brown snakes were dangerous. I can only explain it as something just came over me. The fact that Mum doesn't remember makes me think it's a fake memory, but I have such a vivid image of petting the snake, and Mum's face when she saw me. Really creeps me out.
Thanks for watching. Please comment, like, share and subscribe. The Internet Surfer on YouTube for more horror and scary stories.